The team of African leaders that seeks to find peace in the DRC has now been expanded. The team comprises of former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasango, and former Ethiopian President Sahle-Work Zewde. Now, former South African President Kgalema Motlanthe has also been added amongst the team of mediators. Let's take stock of these developments with SABC News international editor Sophie, who joins us now in studio. Sophie, great to see you as always. This announcement, of course, coming off the back of yet another joint meeting between SADC and EAC leaders that took place virtually yesterday. And a big part of the, let's call it, drive with the expansion of this team is to make sure that it's a whole lot more inclusive.
Yes, you are correct. You are aware that the earlier names didn't include, for example, a woman. And we know that in times of conflict, the most vulnerable are the children and women constituting majority of the population. And therefore, you cannot achieve peace when you exclude women in the negotiation process, because they are the majority in any country. But secondly, they have skills, they have views, and they are affected. And therefore, the intention was to be inclusive. Secondly, the language, as you know, that these two regions, that is SADC and East Africa, the main languages that are spoken there, you have Kiswahili that transcend both regions because of countries such as Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, including the DRC, but also you have French-speaking communities. And you also have English-speaking communities in the SADC mainly. And therefore, for inclusivity in terms of communication, you have to take that into consideration. The other important issue, you're talking about two regions trying to find a solution to the current problem in the DRC. When you look at the three names earlier on, you only had Obasango from West Africa, you had Uhuru Kenyatta from East Africa, you had the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, who is almost part of East Africa with IGAD and also Horn of Africa. And therefore, you didn't have someone from the SADC region. And the former South African President Kgalema Motlanthe, being from South Africa, therefore you have a representative from the SADC region. So I think that was the intention. But for me, we've been arguing on different platforms, myself engaged with other editors on the continent. The exclusion of women, for me, was very, very problematic. And I think the leaders did listen, and therefore we have two women now being part of this team.
Right. Or arguably, the M23 rebels are at the center of the conflict. I wonder when we can anticipate their inclusion in ongoing negotiations.
Well, I think that is very critical, because yesterday it was just the state actors and the non-state actors were not included. I think this team will then have to constitute a meeting and a forum where you have both state actors and non-state actors. And the instruction from heads of state and government last night was that this team must move with speed to have a press conference to outline a way forward and how they are going to proceed and what are the issues they will be grappling with as per the mandate of the summit. And therefore, we are hoping to see this team coming up with a process for negotiations, and that will include state actors and non-state actors.
Yeah. You've had, I suppose, conversations with a number of people around this conflict, including both a former and a current president in the DRC, and I'm referring to Joseph Kabila, former president who was recently in South Africa speaking to our former president, Thabo Mbeki, as well as Felix Tshisekedi, the incumbent. I wondered to what extent you reckon there could be dialogue amongst these leaders that could find answers within the country as opposed to relying on these regional structures to come up with these solutions.
When we engaged the former president of the DRC, Joseph Kabila, when he met the former South African President Thabo Mbeki, he indicated that he has met some stakeholders in the DRC. And I think for me, the breaking story was him questioning the fact that the discussions about peace process in the DRC is taking place outside the DRC. The Congolese themselves are not involved. It's countries and us media, particularly international media, talking about this, giving information, analysis, and people coming with proposals. But the Congolese themselves don't have a national dialogue. And him saying it's quite important to have a national dialogue because you can't export this problem. It's a DRC matter that must be resolved by Congolese at the table, all of them. And I think that's what's critical. And I was able to doorstop the president, the current president, Felix Tshisekedi in Namibia after the inauguration. My question was based on the fact that the new president of Namibia made a very powerful statement about a need for Africa to be at peace and to be honest in dealing with conflict. And therefore, I was asking him, what is his reaction based on what the president of Namibia said, with her experience as a diplomat, but also as an activist who has spent time in exile. And then he indicated that he does agree that peace is the only solution. But what was shocking was that he was still calling M23 rebels terrorists. And therefore, by doing that, for me, it gave an indication that he is not willing to engage non-state actors.
Yeah, or at least we're still a long way to everybody sitting around one table. Final bite of this particular cherry, Sophie. We've also seen in the past couple of days Angola pulling out of these peace talks. In fact, the president saying that they want to spend a whole lot more of their attention focusing on the AU mandate.
Yes, you know that the president of Angola is now the chair of the African Union at the assembly level, at the heads of state and government level until next year, February. And therefore, these reports must be presented to the AU. And therefore, he can't be a referee and a player at the same time, sitting where negotiations are happening, and then the report gets presented to him, and he does make recommendations to African leaders. And therefore, him pulling out, for me, it was because of the responsibility he has now. He's not far from this issue. He is at least now even at a better position as the AU chair of the assembly, leading all the heads of state and government leaders on this matter. He will be able to communicate the outcomes and proposals and decisions that might lead to a better solution to this conflict. And I think that had to do with his role as the AU chair.
Fair enough. And of course, we'll watch the different discussions around that continuing. But I wonder if it can move you slightly, Sophie, to tensions of a different kind. Ibrahim Rasool, South Africa's ambassador to the US, now back home. He's expelled, but seemingly undeterred, saying he has no regrets. Yesterday, we heard that he had a meeting with the International Relations Department's Ronald Lamola. Any updates about that report, perhaps, that meant to be tabled to the president?
Well, we are told that, in fact, I spoke to Derko. I was told that he did meet the minister. Now, I think he presented his story to the minister. I guess the minister will then meet the president to give the president a report as a political head of Derko. I'm not sure when will the president engage the former ambassador, because the president will still want to get information in terms of the situation in America, even though it's not a question of reviewing what has happened, but just to get insights in terms of what was happening. Because what I do know is that the ambassador was supposed to meet officials of the United States of America, the White House officials, last week Friday. But because of this decision by the Secretary of State to declare him a persona non grata, he had to leave. And I'm told that he was engaging very, very influential, high senior people who are very close to Trump, including those who are dealing with security matters. So there was progress, but unfortunately, this incident happened. And I think him saying that he has no regrets, the reality is, Ayanda, this is what all of us media, analysts, Americans themselves, the world, people are saying that America has taken a different turn where you see the right-wing phenomena and ideology gaining traction, and the extension thereof even the current administration and those around President Trump, trying to ensure that even in other countries, particularly in Europe, those who are contesting elections and who are influential and who are performing well are from the right. But unfortunately, in countries such as Germany, there was a pushback. Now Canada is going to elections. People are waiting to see whether America will have influence or there will be a serious pushback because Canadians are not happy. France is the same. We saw how the right party made inroads, and therefore the issue also, how do we are going to see this pushback in the United Kingdom. In South Africa, the people who have been to America, who are claiming to have met and spoken to senior leaders of the US administration, are the two groups, that is Solidarity and AfriForum, who are almost on the right in terms of what they stand for and what they are for. Yes, of course, the DA also had meetings. We don't know at which level, because what's funny for me is that these people don't want to divulge who they met. I'm saying Ibrahim Rasool was going to meet very senior people who are very close to Trump, including within the security advisory team. But they don't tell us who they met, because then we can make sense whether those meetings were really, really impactful. But we see what Trump is doing. We saw yesterday, again, Marco Rubio talking about Julius Malema, whom we are struggling to get hold of in terms of getting a one-on-one with him to talk about these international matters, because his name is also at the center. But this is what's happening worldwide. So I think Rasool is saying, I have no regrets, because he told the truth. But the truth hurts, and as a diplomat, you can't be direct, and perhaps that's the only difference.
Well, I've heard arguments about that being an academic space, for example, where there's a contestation of ideas, and we reflect on these theoretical concepts at the very least. But I suppose that's a discussion we can have at another time. Sophie Mokoena, always a pleasure. Sophie Mokoena is SABC News International Editor. Once again, thanks very much indeed.